They didn't hear an explosion. They didn't see missiles in the sky. And when it finally happened, there was no moment where the world stopped to react, because by the time anyone realized something had taken place, it was already over. There were no alerts, no warnings, no buildup that people could point to and say, "That's when it started." Just silence. And somewhere inside that silence, one of the most complex and dangerous military operations in modern history was already unfolding. Not in real time, not as a breaking story, but hours earlier, far away, in the dark, long before anyone was paying attention. Aircraft were already in the air, not circling, not waiting, but moving. Moving across continents, refueling in silence, communicating as little as possible, carrying weapons designed for targets that were never supposed to be reachable. And the people inside those aircraft understood something that almost no one else did in that moment. By the time the world noticed them, they would already be gone. And that's what makes this different, because this wasn't just an attack. It was something the world experienced after it had already happened. This moment didn't begin on June 22nd. It began long before that, over decades of tension that never truly disappeared, only changed shape. The United States and Iran have existed in a constant state of pressure, a relationship defined not by open war, but by something far more unstable: uncertainty. Every failed negotiation, every warning that was ignored, every line that was drawn and then tested added to something that was always building beneath the surface. And at the center of all of it, there was one question that refused to go away. What happens if Iran crosses the nuclear threshold? That question wasn't theoretical. It wasn't distant. It was immediate. Because once that line is crossed, it can't be undone. It changes the balance of power permanently. It reshapes how every decision is made, not just in the Middle East, but across the entire world. For years, that question was held back by diplomacy, by pressure, by the hope that something could prevent the moment from ever arriving. But pressure doesn't disappear. It accumulates, and eventually, it forces a decision. In the weeks leading up to the strike, that pressure began to show, not publicly and not in a way that people could clearly see, but in small, controlled movements. Intelligence patterns began to shift, military positioning became more deliberate, and certain decisions started to feel less like preparation and more like alignment. The kind of alignment that only happens when something is no longer hypothetical. From the outside, it still looked like diplomacy was in play. Deadlines were mentioned, statements were made, and there was still talk of negotiation, of giving Iran time, of avoiding escalation. And that's exactly what made it effective. Because while attention was focused on what was being said, almost no one was paying attention to what was already being done behind the scenes, where plans were being finalized, routes calculated, and timing perfected down to the smallest detail. The mission didn't start with noise. It started with departure. From the United States, in complete operational secrecy, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers lifted into the night. There was no urgency visible from the outside, no indication that this was different from any other flight. But inside those aircraft, everything was different, because once they were in the air, the operation had already begun. The B-2 wasn't built for visibility. It was built for absence. Designed to slip through airspace without being detected, to appear where it shouldn't exist, to remove the idea of warning entirely, it doesn't rely on speed or force to survive, but on the fact that, most of the time, it simply isn't there. And on this mission, that absence became the most important weapon. Inside each bomber, 2 crew members prepared for a flight that would take them across the world and back without anyone ever knowing they were there, carrying weapons designed not to explode on impact, but to disappear into the ground first, reaching targets that were built with the assumption that they could never be reached. But what defined this operation wasn't just the technology, it was the strategy behind it. While those bombers moved silently toward their objective, another movement was happening at the same time, one that was meant to be seen. Aircraft were sent in the opposite direction toward the Pacific, a deliberate action designed to draw attention, to give analysts something to track, something that made sense on the surface. And that's exactly why it worked. While observers focused on that visible movement, trying to understand its purpose, the real strike package advanced quietly, without pressure, without interference, and by the time anyone realized something didn't add up, it was already too late. For nearly 18 hours, those aircraft remained in the air, refueling mid-flight, maintaining strict communication discipline, minimizing any chance of detection. Every movement had been calculated, every second accounted for, because once they entered Iranian airspace, there would be no margin for error. And then, they crossed the line. No alarms, no interception, no resistance. What followed didn't feel like a battle. It felt like execution. As the strike package moved into position, everything expanded in perfect synchronization. Fighter aircraft surged ahead, scanning for threats that never came, while support systems aligned across multiple domains, and beneath the surface, unseen, a submarine launched a wave of Tomahawk missiles toward key infrastructure. Everything was timed to the second, because the entire operation depended on one thing: surprise that never breaks. At approximately 2:10 in the morning local time, the first bomb dropped. And in that moment, one of the most protected nuclear facilities in the world, Fordow, stopped being untouchable. Buried deep within a mountain, shielded by massive layers of rock and reinforced to survive almost any attack, it had been designed around one assumption: that no weapon could reach it. That assumption lasted until that moment because the bomb didn't explode on impact. It disappeared first, driving deep into the structure before detonating from within. Then it happened again and again and again as multiple sites, Fordow, Natanz, Isfahan, were struck with precision that left no room for reaction. 14 bunker-busting weapons were deployed, each one designed to go deeper and hit harder, and still nothing responded. No jets scrambled, no missile systems engaged, no defensive response interrupted the strike. According to initial reports, Iranian air defenses didn't fire a single shot. The aircraft entered, executed the mission, and exited as if they had never been there at all. The entire strike, from first impact to final detonation, lasted just 25 minutes. A short window that stands in sharp contrast to the hours of preparation and years of tension that led to it. But the real story didn't end there, because destruction is immediate, but understanding it is not. In the aftermath, officials described the operation as precise and successful, suggesting that Iran's nuclear capabilities had been severely damaged, possibly even eliminated. But even within those statements, uncertainty remained. Satellite imagery showed impact zones, debris, and structural damage, but it also raised questions. There were indications that materials may have been moved, that equipment could have been relocated before the strike, that parts of the program may have survived. And that uncertainty changes everything, because if the capability still exists, then this wasn't an ending. It was a message, a demonstration of reach, precision, and control. A signal that the United States could project power anywhere in the world at any time without warning. And in that sense, the operation achieved something beyond physical damage. It showed what was possible. But messages like that don't exist in isolation. They demand a response. In the hours following the strike, U.S. forces across the region were placed on high alert. Bases reinforced their defenses, intelligence agencies shifted their focus to monitoring potential retaliation, and the tension that had been building for years entered a new phase. Because now, the decision isn't in the air anymore, it's on the ground. Iran must decide whether to respond or absorb the impact, and neither option comes without consequences. History shows that moments like this don't end cleanly. They evolve. And sometimes, the most dangerous part isn't the strike itself, but what comes after. Because while the world is still trying to understand what just happened, while analysts examine the damage and leaders weigh their next move, something else may already be unfolding. Another decision, another movement, another moment building in silence. And just like before, we won't see it coming. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.